The world is definitely going to end one day. All of this will be gone and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Everything is temporary and we're all going to die. I'm going to talk to some experts, share some history, and find out the truth about what's finally going to do us in, how long we have till it happens, and if there's anything we can do to slow it down.
You are going to lose London, parts of New York, Boston, parts of Washington.
The mass movement of people, dwindling natural resources.
One of the things I don't think we fully understand is how life is all interwoven and what, when you start pulling those threads out, it might do.
Maybe as I was worrying about nuclear war and robots, the real answer to the end of the world was right in front of me. People burning shit they shouldn't be burning. Since 1880, the world has seen a 1.4 degree rise in temperature, with 2/3 of that coming since 1975. But you don't need me to explain climate change to you. You've heard all this before. Let's look at the scary details though, like the unexpected consequences of climate change. It could be disease, not flooding, that kills us all. And what's the deal with climate change deniers? What could their motivation possibly be? We'll also look at the ways that climate change is already affecting the world and hurting people. But just how bad is it? I'd heard whispers about a mysterious man who had all the answers. He'd predicted this years before anyone else, but no one believed him. He was cast away to the fringes of society. So from your research, what does a worst case scenario world completely beset by climate change look like?
Well, the scientists are, of course, continuing to wrestle with the details, but there are some who are concerned that the vast stores of methane and carbon dioxide in the frozen Arctic soils of the world could be released over a time period that would actually significantly worsen the climate crisis.
In other words, there's already naturally occurring greenhouse gases frozen in some super cold dirt. But as the Earth gets warmer from human-caused greenhouse gases, those natural gases could defrost and be released into the atmosphere. What are some of the unexpected scenarios that someone might not know is a consequence of climate change and rising temperatures?
The radical change in the relationship between human beings and microbes. We saw the Zika virus mutate and create catastrophic birth defects in parts of the Americas last year. One of many tropical diseases spread largely by air travel and the transportation revolution, but the changing climate conditions change the areas in which these viral diseases and bacterial diseases take root and become endemic. The relationship between humans and these microbes has always been mediated by climate, and as the climate changes, that's an area that people are keeping a close eye on.
Because we understand how to live on the Earth at this temperature. We don't know how to live on the Earth at a higher temperature.
Well, not in the civilization we've constructed. And all of the food crops that we rely upon were patiently selected over many, many generations by Neolithic women during the Stone Ages. And the plants that they selected, that we still eat, are optimized for the climate conditions that we're now in the process of changing. We need more fresh water as temperatures increase. Humans, animals, plants, a lot of our systems, like energy systems, all need water, particularly agriculture. And we are depleting the underground water aquifers in quite a few regions of the world much faster than they can be replenished.
So that's what they mean by water everywhere and none of it to drink. And that was coming from the Vice President Al Gore. He was the Vice President, so he's got some clout. But I'm going to talk to some other really trustworthy people too, like the military. This is retired Rear Admiral David Titley. He was in charge of the Navy's climate operations for years.
30 feet of sea level rise probably displaces roughly 500 million people, 500 million people. And some people say, well, geez, we're going to have a long time, and we are taking an already pressurized world with lots of issues, and we are now adding one that was in fact caused by man, the rapidly changing climate. If you look at the UN big report, they call it the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's a mouthful, but it's a big UN report that's kind of a consensus report of everybody. They actually don't have that alarming talk about sea level rise. They talk about it's a few feet, maybe 2, 3, possibly 3 feet, but more like 2 feet in their last report. More and more of the science is saying that's a pretty significant underestimation. Okay. There are a lot of things that we can still do, but there's a saying in the Navy that the naval aviators have, and they say 2 things are of no use to you as a pilot: altitude above you and runway behind you. And I would argue we're putting a bunch of runway behind us on this. There really is no planet B.
But if you don't trust the military, what about the clergy? The Pope himself said in a letter about climate change that the Earth is an immense pile of filth. The Pope said that. This is Gaël Giroux. He's a Catholic priest and scientist who works with the French government on their climate research.
If we don't do anything, maybe some of the images we find in the last book of the Bible, the Apocalypse, will have to be interpreted literally along this median scenario of the IPCC, which is the International Panel for Scientists in Climate. And then we should have something like 74% of the population on Earth at the end of this century, which will be under lethal threat because of heat. So I would not expect the entire mankind to disappear, but certainly genocides to take place. 3/4 will probably die if we don't do anything. The city of Amman in Jordania today is pumping water in a source which is located 400 meters below the soil, but in a source which does not regenerate. And we know already today that in about 25 years, this source will be empty. So this is a big question. How will people from Amman find water in 1 generation? According to one of these scenarios, which is the most frightening, we might have a huge collapse in the second half of this century. Where will it begin? It's hard to say. Most probably either in sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia. But in any case, this means that we'll have huge number of people starving and migrating, and then probably an economic collapse of continents like Africa, Southeast Asia. You could find probably some elites in some countries who could think, well, this will be just a mess. We're not going to be able to give food to everybody. We're not going to be able to give energy and drinkable water to everybody. So let's put into practice a harsh military dictatorship to make sure that our families will get something to eat and to drink.
If you don't believe those guys acting based on numbers and research, I also met with David Nicholson. He works with the climate change division of Mercy Corps, where he works in developing countries. Nicholson sees the real-life effects of change that are already happening to communities around the world.
We think about climate change as something of a threat multiplier. So we're starting to see less and less access to certain key resources, or the reliability of certain weather patterns making agricultural systems more and more challenging. So it magnifies existing challenges. One specific example I can give you is the work we've been doing in Ethiopia. We've been working for many years with cattle raising communities in the drylands of Ethiopia, which are really seeing significant shifts in weather pattern. We've been working quite closely with different communities to figure out new ways to manage natural resources, the grasslands that their cattle rely on, the water resources, the water points that for a long time they've relied upon. And this is because the traditional methods, which have been around for thousands of years, are no longer suitable to a shifting weather and weather pattern and a shifting climate.
Do you think the first world has too much of a sense of comfort and security with regards to these things?
Certain wealthier countries are more insulated from the challenges we've seen so far. People's livelihoods are less directly linked to the weather system. We don't rely on food growing in our own land in order to feed ourselves and our families. We also have systems of governance and governments that put things into play that support us. But that cushion will run out at some point because these challenges will be beyond what we're currently able to cope with. The mass movement of people, dwindling natural resources, these are things that can cause conflict and can lead to larger regional conflicts that will inevitably have security concerns for the rest of the world.
All the people I spoke to came from different facets of society, yet they all agree. Climate change as a threat is real and it's being caused by humans. But some people don't agree, and I honestly don't know what's going through their heads. Do they seriously not believe the science, or do they only care about money and have no foresight? Or are they all cynical lunatics doggedly pursuing the end of the world?
Having these silly false debates about the science is nothing more than a delaying tactic.
100% of peer-reviewed scientists have a consensus, and that is that this is happening.
I don't believe that. 100%, every bit of that global warming, don't buy it.
They don't have to disprove science. They don't have to disprove global warming. They just want to create doubt. They want to create confusion. They want to create the perception that there's this big tussle in the science community. And they go through considerable lengths to do that. But none of that changes the fact that the ice will continue to melt.
So what evidence are these people who don't seem scared of climate change possibly using? Take President Trump, for example. When he pulled out of the Paris Accord, he said this:
"Even if the Paris Agreement were implemented in full, with total compliance from all nations, it is estimated it would only produce a 0.2 of 1 degree, think of that, this much, Celsius reduction in global temperature by the year 2100. Tiny, tiny amount."
So obviously I had to talk to the guy that did the study Trump was quoting, Dr. John Riley of MIT's Joint Program on the Science and Policy of Global Change. Is there anything in your research that justifies him saying pulling out of the Paris Accord is a good idea based on what you guys found?
So we in no way imagined that our work would suggest that you should get out of Paris. Mm-hmm. If anything, we were trying to suggest that too bad that Paris didn't go a little bit further, right. And that there was a lot more work to be done in succeeding accords. If you're going on a long hike, the first step isn't going to get you very far. But if you say, oh, well, never mind, you'll never get there.
President Trump's thing with the Paris Accord, that's not the first time this has happened to your team. In 2008, something similar happened with members of Congress?
Yes, we were looking at the Waxman-Markey bill at that point, and we were trying to say, look how much revenue could be generated by selling the allowances rather than giving them away, and that could then result in $2,500 being sent to every family of 4. So the Republicans took that $2,500 and said that was the cost of the policy to every family, which was exactly kind of a complete misinterpretation of the story. Yeah. So, very disturbing.
So how big of a deal is it to pull out of the Paris Accord? Let's go talk to Laurence Toubiana. She was France's ambassador to COP21, so she basically wrote the damn thing.
So it's not a good news. First, because United States is the biggest economy at world level, and of course he has been a driving force among other big players to really finally negotiate this agreement. Yes, Donald Trump has decided to withdraw from Paris Agreement, but the American society no. What do you see these days? States like New York State or California or many others are saying we are still in. You have more than 1,200 companies who said, we don't want that. We want to continue to go in the right direction.
Even if the world's moving in the right direction, it still really feels like we've passed a point of no return. So I went back to Vice President Al Gore to ask him if we should just give up. What do you have to say to someone that watches the news, hears this research, and just says, we're fucked. I'm going to go to my bunker and hide?
Yeah, is this where we get to the hope?
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, yeah. Well, the solutions to the climate crisis are being developed much faster than people expected. Electricity, for example, from solar and wind is now cheaper in many regions than electricity from burning fossil fuels. Sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, battery technologies, electric vehicles, retrofit of buildings. All of these are job creators. All of these are developing quickly. We do need the policies that will push these solutions forward. Even though they're cheaper, the old carbon polluting companies are still trying to hold back the change. So I hope your audience will decide to become politically active. Join the Indivisible movement, for example. Join the Climate Reality Project. Let the policymakers and politicians know that you really care about this. If there are massive numbers of people who feel passionately about it, everything will change for the better.
One of the experts I spoke with accidentally gave me an interesting solution to the problem.
It may be that whole chunks of the Earth become largely uninhabitable and impoverished, and in that sense, greenhouse gas emissions may be self-limiting. If there's few people and we're all poor, we won't be driving Hummers around. That's not the type of policy we recommend to solve climate change.
But it's too late. You already said it. So if a human-free Earth is key, what could destroy all humans but leave the Earth intact? Major disease could do it. Grab your hand sanitizer, because next time we dive headfirst into global epidemic.